The Nazi war machine, fueled by Hitler's ambition, stormed through Europe. Poland fell swiftly, followed by Denmark, Norway, and France. These victories, achieved in rapid succession, inflated Hitler's ego. He believed himself invincible, a military genius destined to rule the world. The early victories, however, masked fatal flaws in Hitler's strategic thinking. He underestimated his enemies and overestimated the capabilities of his own forces. The Wehrmacht, Germany's armed forces, were indeed formidable. They were well-equipped and well-trained, operating with ruthless efficiency. However, their early victories were as much a result of surprise and speed as they were of superior strength. Hitler's gamble on blitzkrieg, a tactic of lightning-fast attacks, had paid off. Yet, this early success blinded him to the dangers of overextension and the resilience of his enemies. The fall of France in particular seemed to confirm Hitler's belief in his own invincibility. Paris was occupied, and France was forced to sign an armistice. This victory sent shockwaves through the world. However, the ease with which France fell was deceptive. Furthermore, Britain, under the defiant leadership of Winston Churchill, refused to surrender. The Battle of Britain, a fierce air campaign, raged in the skies over England. Emboldened by his early triumphs, Hitler turned his attention eastward. In June 1941, he unleashed Operation Barbarossa, a massive invasion of the Soviet Union. This decision was a colossal blunder, one that would ultimately seal his fate. Hitler believed that the Soviet Union was a colossus with feet of clay, ripe for conquest. He underestimated the size, resources, and determination of the Soviet people. The initial stages of the invasion seemed to confirm Hitler's optimism. German forces advanced rapidly, capturing vast swathes of territory. However, the Soviet Union was too vast, its people too resilient to be easily subdued. As the harsh Russian winter set in, the German advance stalled. The Wehrmacht, ill-prepared for the brutal conditions, suffered heavy casualties. The invasion of the Soviet Union was a strategic disaster of epic proportions. As the war in Europe raged, another power watched with growing concern. The United States, under President Franklin D. Roosevelt, had initially remained neutral. However, the attack on Pearl Harbor by Japan in December 1941 shattered any pretense of isolationism. The United States declared war on Japan, and Germany, in a fateful decision, declared war on the United States. The entry of the United States into the war transformed the global conflict. The United States possessed vast industrial and military might. American factories churned out tanks, planes, and ships at an astonishing rate. American soldiers, sailors, and airmen, filled with a sense of purpose, poured into the fight. The arrival of American forces in Europe and the Pacific tilted the balance of power decisively against the Axis powers. Furthermore, the United States provided crucial material aid to its allies, particularly Great Britain and the Soviet Union. The Lend-Lease Act, passed by Congress in 1941, authorized the president to provide military aid to any country whose defense was deemed vital to the security of the United States. Hitler's decision to declare war on the United States was a strategic blunder of the highest order. Hitler's leadership style, characterized by paranoia, indecision, and a disdain for expert advice, contributed significantly to Germany's downfall. He surrounded himself with sycophants who were too afraid to challenge his flawed judgments. Dissent was not tolerated, and those who dared to question his decisions were often removed from their positions, or worse. As the war progressed and German fortunes waned, Hitler's behavior became increasingly erratic. He retreated into a world of fantasy, convinced that Germany could still achieve victory through sheer willpower. He micromanaged military operations, often overruling the advice of his experienced generals. One of the most egregious examples of Hitler's flawed leadership was his refusal to allow the retreat of German forces from Stalingrad. Despite being encircled and facing overwhelming odds, Hitler ordered the Sixth Army to stand and fight to the death. The result was a catastrophic defeat, with hundreds of thousands of German soldiers killed or captured. On June 6, 1944, the tide of the war in Europe turned decisively. On that day, known as D-Day, Allied forces under the command of General Dwight D. Eisenhower launched a massive amphibious assault on the beaches of Normandy, France. This daring operation, years in the planning, marked the beginning of the liberation of Western Europe from Nazi tyranny. The D-Day landings were a testament to the courage and sacrifice of the Allied soldiers, sailors, and airmen who participated in the operation. They faced fierce resistance from the German defenders, who were dug in along the coastline. However, the sheer scale of the invasion, combined with the determination of the Allied forces, proved overwhelming. The success of the D-Day landings established a crucial foothold for the Allies in Western Europe. From their beachheads in Normandy, Allied forces, including American, British, Canadian, and Free French troops, pushed inland, liberating Paris and driving the Germans back towards their own borders. The liberation of France was a major turning point in the war, demoralizing the Germans and boosting Allied morale. The D-Day invasion also marked the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany. Following the successful D-Day landings, the Allied armies advanced relentlessly towards Germany. The Red Army, having turned the tide on the Eastern Front, pushed westward, liberating Eastern Europe from Nazi occupation. The Western Allies, spearheaded by American and British forces, advanced from the west, liberating France and the Low Countries. Despite facing mounting losses and dwindling resources, German forces continued to fight with fierce determination. Fueled by propaganda and fear of Allied retribution, German soldiers and civilians alike resisted the Allied advance. However, the outcome of the war was no longer in doubt. The combined might of the Soviet Union, the United States, Great Britain, and their allies proved too powerful for Germany to overcome. As the Allies drew closer to Germany, the full horror of the Nazi regime was revealed to the world. The liberation of concentration camps, such as Auschwitz-Birkenau, exposed the depths of Nazi barbarity. By early 1945, the writing was on the wall for Nazi Germany. Soviet forces, having battled their way across Eastern Europe, reached the outskirts of Berlin. The Western Allies, having crossed the Rhine River, were closing in from the west. Trapped in a vice, the once mighty Third Reich crumbled from within. As Soviet forces stormed Berlin, Hitler retreated to his underground bunker, a symbol of his regime's demise. On April 30th, 1945, with Soviet troops just blocks away, Hitler committed suicide. The fall of Berlin marked the end of the war in Europe. Hitler's downfall was a direct result of his own hubris and strategic blunders. His early victories, fueled by blitzkrieg tactics and the element of surprise, blinded him to the realities of a protracted war against powerful adversaries. His invasion of the Soviet Union, a decision driven by ideological fanaticism and a fundamental misunderstanding of Soviet capabilities, proved to be a fatal miscalculation. The consequences of Hitler's actions were catastrophic, not only for Germany, but for the entire world. Tens of millions of people perished in the conflict, victims of Nazi aggression, genocide, and the relentless machinery of war. In the aftermath of the war, the world grappled with the enormity of the Nazi crimes and the challenges of rebuilding a shattered Europe. The Nuremberg trials, held between 1945 and 1949, brought Nazi leaders to justice for their roles in the Holocaust and other war crimes. World War II marked a turning point in human history. The defeat of Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan ushered in a new era, one dominated by the rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union. The Cold War, a geopolitical struggle between these two superpowers, would shape global politics for decades to come. The horrors of the Holocaust led to a renewed emphasis on human rights and the creation of the United Nations. The war also accelerated the process of decolonization as European powers, weakened by the conflict, were forced to grant independence to their colonies. The lessons of World War II remain as relevant today as they were in the aftermath of the conflict. The dangers of nationalism, extremism, and unchecked aggression are as real now as they were then. The importance of international cooperation, diplomacy, and the defense of democratic values has never been greater. The Holocaust, a stark reminder of the consequences of hatred and intolerance, must never be forgotten. The sacrifices made by those who fought to defeat Nazi tyranny must be honored by striving to create a more just, peaceful, and equitable world. Only through vigilance, compassion, and a commitment to shared humanity can we hope to prevent the horrors of the past from being repeated.